If you were gone for 5 hours as a kid and nobody called the police, you might be from the 70s. And that childhood built a mindset most people today can't even imagine. People who grew up in the 1970s carry a psychology that feels almost impossible to explain to anyone born after 2000. Not because one is better, not because one is weaker, but because the world that shaped them was completely different. And when the world changes, the brain changes with it. By the end of this, I want you to answer one question. Which generation had it harder, and why? And more importantly, which one are you? Let's rewind. Imagine being 10 years old. It's summer. You leave the house at noon. No phone, no GPS, no share location. You just say, "I'll be back before dark." And that's it. You disappear for 5 hours. You ride your bike across town. You fall, you bleed, you fix it. You knock on your friend's door. If they're not home, you keep riding. Nobody tracks you. Nobody texts you. Nobody panics. That kind of childhood sounds wild today, but psychologically, it built something rare. It built autonomy. In psychology, there's something called self-determination theory. Two researchers, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, found that humans grow stronger when they feel three things: autonomy, competence, and connection. Kids in the 70s had autonomy by default. No one hovered over them every second. So they learned to decide, they learned to act, they learned to deal with the results. That creates something called an internal locus of control, a fancy way of saying, my life depends on me. That's why many people from that era still have this strange, quiet confidence. Even when they have no clue what they're doing, there's a voice inside that says, I'll figure it out. Not because they read it in a self-help book, because they lived it. But here's the part most people forget. To understand the 70s generation, you have to look at their parents. Most of them were raised by people who either lived through World War II or were born right after it. Think about that for a second. Their parents knew real fear, real hunger, real loss. Not Wi-Fi going down, not a bad comment online, real survival. And those parents didn't talk much about it. They didn't sit down and explain their trauma. They didn't say, let me process my feelings. They just worked. They endured. They survived. Psychologists call this intergenerational transmission. Mindsets passed down through behavior, not lectures. When a child watches a parent handle life quietly and steadily, that child absorbs it like air. So, responsibility wasn't a lesson in the 70s. It was the background music of the house. If something broke, you didn't replace it. You fixed it. If your bike tire popped, you patched it. If dinner needed help, you helped. You didn't wait to be asked 3 times. Albert Bandura, a psychologist, talked about something called self-efficacy. It's the belief that you can handle things. And guess how self-efficacy grows? By actually handling things, not watching tutorials, not reading motivational quotes, doing. That's why many people from the 70s matured earlier, not because they wanted to, because the environment demanded it. They saw their parents work long hours without complaining. They saw neighbors help each other without posting it online. No photos, no look how kind I am, just quiet support. When you grow up around that, you develop a backbone. You understand that life is serious, but manageable. Problems aren't personal attacks. They're normal. And here's something almost poetic. They are the bridge generation. 1 foot in a slow analog world, 1 foot in the fast digital one. They remember life before the internet, before constant noise, before every thought had to be shared. But they also watched the world flip upside down into screens, notifications, and endless scrolling. That gives them perspective. When you talk to someone from that era, there's often a grounded feeling. They're not trying to win a competition you didn't know you were in. They're not chasing validation every 5 minutes. Their confidence doesn't come from applause. It comes from surviving. Now, let's look at the other side. People born after 2000 grew up with a device in their hand before they could speak clearly. Notifications, videos, messages, timelines, infinite content. Their brain has been on high alert since childhood. And here's where science gets interesting. There's something called cognitive load theory. The human brain can only process so much information at once. But today, the average person consumes more information in a single day than someone in the 70s might have seen in a week. Every scroll is a new image. Every notification is a tiny interruption. And each interruption costs attention. There was even a Microsoft study in 2015 suggesting average attention spans dropped compared to the early 2000s. Whether the exact numbers debated or not, the trend is clear. We're more distracted. And then there's dopamine. Social media platforms are designed around reward cycles. You post something, you wait, you get a like. Tiny hit of dopamine. Your brain says, do that again. So you scroll, you refresh, you check again. The problem? The brain never fully rests. Even when someone says, I'm just relaxing on my phone, their mind is still processing, still comparing, still reacting. That creates a different kind of stress. Not survival stress, comparison stress. You're not competing with 5 kids on your street. You're competing with millions of curated lives. So many young people today feel behind even when they're doing fine. They feel tired even when they haven't done physical labor. They feel overwhelmed because their brain hasn't had silence in years. Now, before anyone gets defensive, let's be fair. The post-2000 generation is incredibly smart, creative, open-minded. They grew up with access to information that older generations couldn't dream of. They can learn anything in minutes. They're more aware of mental health, more open about emotions. But they're also overstimulated. And the human brain didn't evolve for constant stimulation. So, which generation had it harder? The 70s kid faced real-world danger, less protection, less safety nets. If you messed up, you felt it immediately. The 2000s kid faces invisible pressure, constant comparison, endless information. A world that moves faster than biology can comfortably handle. One had to grow strong physically and practically. The other has to grow strong mentally and emotionally. Different battles, different scars. Maybe the real question isn't who had it harder. Maybe it's this: what can each generation learn from the other? The older generation could learn to talk more, to open up, to not carry everything silently. The younger generation could learn to sit in silence sometimes, to be bored, to fix something instead of replacing it, to trust that voice that says, I'll figure it out. Because strength doesn't come from being taught, it comes from being tested. And every generation is tested, just in different ways. So now I'm curious, were you born before 1980 or after? And honestly, what was the hardest part of growing up in your time?